Welcome to Unashamed, Unafraid, a show unashamed about sexual addiction recovery and unafraid of coming unto Christ for healing.
Where we talk about real recovery stories, answer anonymous questions with experts, and share resources that actually work.
I'm your host, Steve.
And I'm your co-host, Jason, and we are Unashamed, Unafraid.
Jason, he's been on good behavior, so we're letting him on the other side of the mic.
I'm back, y'all.
Love you.
Yeah, I love you. I'm excited to be here.
Freaking love Troy.
Yeah.
Authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Done.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the whole thing here is this journey from I can't be seen to I'm going to be authentic and be who I want to be.
So, he said some things I'm going to steal permanently. Like sometimes the way people talk about recovery, you're just like, and that's it. And I'm like, and that's how we're all going to talk about it now, what you just said. And he definitely had some of those. I'm not going to steal his thunder and talk about it. But one reason why you should listen to this episode, Jason.
Well, I mean, the bonus content, just that idea of authenticity, that was game changing.
Yeah. And what I want to share, one of the reasons Troy reached out is Troy is divorced, got divorced in his process and is still divorced. And he's like, dude, we got to talk from this space. And I'm like, that's unashamed, brother. Let's do it. And so just a lot of authenticity, really tender. And one thing I loved about Troy that I'll name at the front of this episode is how he talked about his ex-wife. It wasn't everything's her fault.
A lot of compassion.
And he also wasn't like, oh, she's perfect and I'm the problem, because that's kind of a facade too. He talks about both of those. Great episode. Jump in with us. Give us 5 stars on iTunes. That's where you can find us to help share the hope of what we're sharing here with everyone. We'd love to hear from you on social media at Unashamed Unafraid. Go to our website, unashamedunafraid.com/scholarship/donations. Scholarships if you need help, recovery tools, therapy, retreats, all sorts of things. We will pay for you to go. We are a nonprofit 501c3. So all of the money, Jason doesn't get paid to edit audio. We just lock him in a basement, chain him to the desk, and make him do it. And so all of the money goes to scholarships. And if you want to help support those people in recovery and resources that you enjoy and love, we invite you to donate there at the website as well.
We're actually also hurting for anonymous questions. So if you have any, please go to the website.
Give us some anonymous questions.
Ask us your questions.
Yep.
We want to answer them for you.
Yep, and you can do it anonymously, so you don't have to worry about any of that. So with that, we will head on down to Texas.
Old El Paso,
and get in the studio with Troy. Troy, what's up?
How's it going?
So here's the thing with this guy, Troy, okay? First off, I'm going to tell you 2 things about Troy. One, the patience. So we've had to reschedule this, I think, twice, Troy?
Twice already, yep.
And not to Troy's doing.
I was beginning to feel insecure.
Yeah, it was on us. So we owe Troy some repair on that. So whatever you need on that, let Jason know. Jason will take care of it. And we're happy this episode to have Jason on this side of the mic.
Yeah, I'm back.
So he's got a little facial hair. He's matured a little since last time. So we're
got some gray in my beard now.
So we're ready for that. And so the other thing I want to bring up right here at the front. So Troy nonchalantly just kind of drops on us. Oh, and by the way, I'm getting rebaptized this Saturday.
I am getting rebaptized this Saturday. And yeah, I mean, we can definitely go into that more.
Planning on it.
And about my feelings concerning that, because it might not be what everyone expects, but it's definitely been an interesting journey.
Yeah, and I think that's what I love, just the emails. We've had some emails back and forth, and I know you met some of the team at Wild at Heart. I'm mad that I wasn't there that weekend and didn't get to meet you in person, but it's been a journey, and I think that you and I have even just talking just before this, that we're kind of kindred spirits, that I think there's key moments in our story where I don't know that many people would have bet on us at certain injunctures. And so it's been a journey, right? Being rebaptized, being where you are. And so tell us, right, give us kind of the classic, what happened when you were a kid around sex, around God, like how did that all come together for you in adolescence?
Okay. So I grew up in a very Mormon town and a very Mormon family. I was the fourth of 5 kids. a couple, I have a hard time saying that it was sexual abuse or anything like that when I was a kid. It was more like kind of an experimentation that goes on between kids. I was never one that instigated it, but fell into these situations on a couple of occasions. And I think from those, there was really just two incidents. And from both of those, I came away feeling, one, I always had to keep this a secret. Like this was going to be a secret till the day I die. Right. And it was for over 30 years. I did not tell a soul. And then number two, that I would never be worthy, like never. And so that was a pretty heavy load for a young child to go. And we often talk about how our relationship with our Father often affects how we feel about God too. Right. And so I remember one time I was in with a therapist and they were asking me, hey, what's your relationship like with your father? And the words just came out of my mouth before I even had a chance to say anything. It was just like, I am my father's least favorite son. And I was like, I'm not sure where that came from, but that is exactly how I feel. And I'm sure my dad would totally deny that. I'm sure he wouldn't agree with it at all, but that's how I felt growing up. So kind of those two things, I definitely related to when you guys have talked about the try harder gospel, because it felt like to me, in God's view, that he was just saying, if Troy makes it, that's great. We're really not expecting that much from him though, And so it was like up to me to kind of prove that, hey, I'm worth something here. I'm worth saving here, and always having to try to feel like I need to prove that. Of course, even young, I think like 9 or 10 was when I was first exposed to like masturbation. And so that started in quickly, as well as pornography whenever I could find it, continuing up, through my teenage years, eventually went on a mission. And then,
so did you feel worthy to go on a mission, or were you like, I'm just not going to tell anyone, we're good to go? What kind of happened there?
I did. I felt like I got to a place where I was like, I'm good. And I did talk to priesthood leaders about that and said, okay. And, I was probably kind of underselling it and saying, oh yeah, a little problem here.
Maybe like 3-6 months of sobriety, something like that, or.
Right. Yeah. And then I got out there to the mission field. And then when I came home, it kind of just started up again. Right.
Yeah. So it wasn't a problem on your mission?
No, I mean, there was probably a couple incidences, but overall, I felt like I did a pretty good job of keeping it under control, but it was nothing that I was going to tell anybody about either when I was out there.
Yeah. How did your script change at all about that worthiness and, being the least favorite son? Did any of that change on your mission? How did it shift coming back?
I don't think it did. I remember talking to another missionary one time, because I was one of those missionaries that was like annoyingly obedient, just everything, like to the letter.
He would have loved me.
I think we're all in that same boat. No, you're
I'm here.
No.
I'm shaking my head. No, everyone can't see, but I was that guy that was
audio medium, Steve.
That was like whatever, letter of the law. I had a good heart though, but yeah. Anyways,
I was more on Troy's level.
So Troy.
Yes.
So you're coming back.
So I'm coming back. About, I guess I'd only been home for about a year or so when I had met my wife. And this was a big thing as far as pornography and masturbation. This was a big thing to her because that was something that had affected her family. Her parents were divorced. And this was a large component of that. And so she asked me about that, and I kind of, again, kind of minimized it. I was in the process of trying, but I was like, no, I'm good. And, for the most part I was, but there definitely was quite a few slip ups as well.
Sure.
So we get married, and it is much different than I expected. And I think I tried to be very careful not to ever speak ill of my ex-wife, but it was something that I think she would agree on. We were both very young, her especially, and I was miserable for the first few years. I was just miserable, and it wasn't really a place where I felt ever safe to share anything, to share any of my weaknesses, to share really any of my feelings at all. So I just kind of clammed up, and of course that helps when you're.
And I'm sure if she was here, she would say the same thing about those early years.
Yeah, she absolutely would.
Yeah. So I guess tell me, looking back now, tell me about that. Like, do you think that was just like your shame? Do you feel like you guys were following cultural scripts when you got married? Like, what about that wasn't working? Just like you didn't know what you were getting into? Like, we just didn't have the right expectations, or?
Yeah, I think it was a lot about not having the right expectations. I mean, I came from a family where my parents never fought at all. I think I witnessed one fight in my entire time growing up. And so she was pretty argumentative, especially when we first got married. And that was just such a surprise to me and such a shock. And in the times when I did share things with her, where I thought I was being open and sharing things, like it would come back and it wasn't that. Like she would be very upset about it for whatever reason. And again, this was early years. She obviously grew and matured a lot after that, but.
Mm-hmm. So that was her miss in the early years. What was yours?
So I was definitely at that point, I was just kind of checked out, because I was like, here is the relationship that is supposed to bring me most happiness, and I'm miserable. I don't want to have anything to do with this. So I fell pretty hard back into things like pornography, masturbation, and then it progressed to things that I had never done, like going to a strip club, going to a massage parlor, things like that I had never done before. But yeah, that's what I felt like I needed to do. Right.
Yeah. So tell me, I think you're sharing something, unique, right? Special. Like when you're like, I was checked out, because I feel like I understand you. I'm like, I get it. But like, what does checked out looked like? Like if you were able to see, if we were watching you back then, how would you describe, internally your experience, what you feel people got from you on the outside?
Oh, I don't think anyone could tell from the outside. I was very, very good at compartmentalizing everything. I've described it a few times as if it felt like, my whole life was like this field, right? And then in the middle was like this swampy cave. And like on the outside, it's like this productive field where I'm a father and I'm a husband and I'm a priesthood holder and I'm and I have a good career and all these things. And then inside, it's just this yuckiness, right? And I described it one time to a therapist, and I said, that middle part, that just terrifies me. And she says, well, why does that terrify you? And I said, well, I think that's the real me. Like, I think everything else is just a facade and a fake, and that's the real me inside. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that anyone could. I'm sure my wife could definitely tell at times, but I don't know that anyone else could really tell, because I was good at putting on that facade.
So sometimes, would you say that you had this facade of, my church service, my activity in the church, my priesthood, all of that kind of stuff, and then on the other side of it, you said you had like the shame and the addiction and everything. Both of them, would you say, were a pressure and were a shame?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would definitely say that both of them were a shame. But on the other hand, as kind of doing that try harder gospel, like it was something, if I keep up that facade, there's that thought in my mind, well, maybe if I do enough here, at the end of the day, when the weights are balanced, then they'll come out in my favor.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I guess one I would ask is like, what was that experience like for you? Because I think people looking from the outside, spouses who haven't got closure in their situation, or family members or leaders, people who just like don't get it. I think sometimes there's this belief like that addicts are having their cake and eating it too, and the only reason we want to change is because we got caught, which isn't true to my story. I know it's true to a lot of stories, and I guess I bring this up because I'm like, at least from my experience, I'll let you speak about yours, but for me, I'm like, oh, it wasn't fun. Like I wasn't like, oh man, I love the fact that I'm getting away with all of this and no one knows, like this is great. So like being in that duality, what was that like for you?
Right. And so I remember talking about this one time, again in therapy, but saying, there's the thought that, you go to these different areas and the sex must be just great. It really wasn't. Like, it was really actually pretty bad. But it was like, that dark spot in the middle, like I felt like I needed to hide it, but I needed to feed it too. And so it was just like a constant thing. And so, yeah, I'd say more than anything, it was just kind of exhausting. Right. And especially because that kind of bled over, and I eventually had an affair that lasted for about a year. And which that was beyond exhausting. That was, and so when I hear about other people expressing multiple affairs, I think, I don't even know how someone accomplishes that, because that right. Sounds just exhausting. But eventually was caught with that. And so that was actually the first time that I was excommunicated. So, went through that,
and so what was your wife's reaction at that point? So she knows you're off, right? As you said, there were times that she could tell, right? Like that the facade wasn't fooling her completely, and, maybe couldn't put her finger on all of it, but that piece was there. So you get caught in the affair, church discipline happens. Where's she at this point?
And so, like at first didn't want to talk to me, didn't want to have anything to do with me. At the time, our kids, we already had all three kids, but they were very young, so they didn't know a lot about what was going on. Due to my job, we were separated anyways, and so she had been staying with her mom, and then both her mom and my mom had kind of discussed with her, because I think they both had seen her actions in marriage and said, "Hey, we know that this is Troy's fault, but there were some things that you had done here. You need to change that." And that was honestly, like, I saw a miracle there. She changed completely. Like, she was a completely different person.
Wow.
And it was something that was amazing to see, but also, like, I kind of felt like, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, because here I am trying to work, but I'm not feeling it. Like, I'm working towards baptism. I'm working towards all those other things. I know a lot of it's because of my family and things like that.
Right. And she's changing a lot. So it's all supposed to be going in the right direction. Right.
Yeah. And I don't feel it. Like, I feel like I have to keep myself in a constant state of shame, because there's that feeling like, well, maybe it was just because I got too prideful or something like that. And so it's like always trying to just, convince myself of this false sense of humility of just trying to be like, no, you're bad. Remember that you gotta stay down. You gotta keep your head down and keep pushing and things like that.
You don't get to feel happy.
Right. Yeah. You don't deserve to feel happy at all.
Well, and we just did an episode with Doug Nielsen. And Doug, you hear me saying your last name right, if you're listening. And I say his name wrong all the time. But about how we end up in this permanent one down position. And the reason I'm just like, ooh, pause, like, I think you just said that so well, Troy, that even when everything starts to go right, there still is this shame of like, you don't deserve that. And I think your situation is a great example of that, because like your wife was changing. Like a lot of times for a lot of people, right? The spouse is like, I'm not the problem. I'm not the one out having affairs or whatever. And it's like later in the process, when there's been a lot of safety and a lot of repair, that then the partner feels safe enough to be able to move or to do something, which I fault no partner for. And so to have her jump in to her emotional healing so quickly, and to have it all going like, man, it couldn't go better for you. But still there's this truth about the shame that it's like, you don't deserve that. Even when your ticket's being punched, it's like, you're not allowed in this movie, and you're holding the ticket in your hand.
That's something that keeps a lot of addicts in their addiction, is they feel like, everything's moving forward and I should be happy, but I don't deserve to be happy. And moments of happiness and moments of this one up become triggering, because then it's like, well, but I don't deserve this, so I have to keep myself down. And I think that's kind of what you were, if I heard you understood you correctly, that's kind of where you were at.
Yeah. And I think it leads back into that facade too, right? Because like that happiness only has to do with that facade. Like, still, if anyone knew what was really inside,
Yeah.
they'd know that I'm just garbage. Right. So, yeah.
I do have a quick question for you. You mentioned before this exhausting feeling, this exhaustion that you were experiencing. What was your reaction when you were caught? Did you feel relieved? Did you feel what was that like for you? Maybe, looking back on it now.
Yeah, I wouldn't say relieved. I can see how someone might feel relieved from that. I wouldn't say that I did, because I think I was trying everything to try to cover it up for a while, so immediately I didn't feel relieved. I was trying.
Well, and I'm just going to tell me if it sounds like you carried your facade into recovery.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Which is, I say that because it's so common. That's how I started recovery. Hero child, earning my worth. And so I'm like, oh, now I just need to earn it in recovery. So just be the best at recovery. Oh, okay. Same game, different
as long
playing
as I
field.
can stay in here and stay out of this yucky part in the middle, as long as I can stay out here, then maybe eventually this will become the real me. But it never does.
Yeah. So you get excommunicated. Your wife's working on her. Everything's going the right way.
Right. And so we were doing everything. She was absolutely wonderful, actually, during this, ARP meetings. She was one of those spouses that went with me to consistently.
Wow.
And she was entirely supportive. When we weren't getting support from priesthood leaders, she would go and talk to them and like kind of on my behalf and say, hey, you need to help him out here. So, eventually got rebaptized, had all my blessings restored, things like that. Then we moved again. I'm actually in the military, so we moved quite a bit. And so we moved overseas. And again, things were actually, they were going well, but it was a lot of white knuckling. It was just me kind of holding on and being like, okay, I'm staying in this area. I know that's still back there, but
just because you'd facaded recovery.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then got over there overseas and found out about like different brothels and stuff that they had over there, and got involved in that, and then at the time also I'd been, called into the leadership in the branch that we had there. And so it was.
Well, that pressure from both sides, as Jason said earlier.
Absolutely. But on the other hand, like we were talking about before, Steve, is like one reason that, going the prostitution route felt nice was it was a lot less exhausting. There was no expectations there. There was no anything, right? It was just the physical, and that was it. So that continued on for a few years. Eventually my wife found, the other bank card that I had hidden from another bank, and this was about the time that we were about to come back to the States. Mm-hmm.
And how long ago was that from today?
So that was January of 2019.
Okay. So we're in January of 19. So it all lands again.
And so she's like, what is this? I do everything. I shut down that account. I'm doing everything to hide this. Right. And she, but she keeps pushing. She's like, I need to see these statements. I need to see them. And so I made a call, had all the statements sent. And then but in my head, I was like, no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to intercept these statements in the mail first. And then I'm going to fabricate all new statements. Like, I am going to work hard at this.
And if Chris Bennett were here, he'd be laughing in the background. Because if you think you're the only man who's tried to do that, you are not the only one. Yep.
And so I was like, so they came in and like, I found that they had every statement in there that I needed except for the last one. And so I was like, all right, I got to remember to get the last one. And so I had those hidden up in my office. And then one time I came home, and in the meantime, we had been, going to ARP program again. We'd been seeing a therapist together, things like that. And then I come home one time and she has that final statement in her hand. And I'm like, oh my gosh, and so she's asking me, and she's like, hey, what is going on? You need to tell me this isn't what you presented it to be, cause I said, oh yeah, it has to do with some pornography and stuff like that, try to minimize everything. but she's like, this obviously isn't what you told me it was. And so she's just crying and begging me to tell her. And so I go into our bedroom and I kneel down to pray, and I am begging God just to, let me slip by this one last time. Just let me get by and get through this one last time. And that was the first time in a long time that I heard him speak to me, and he just said, "Be brave, and everything's going to be okay." And so after that, I got up. I said, "I'll be right back." I went and got the rest of the statements, gave them all to her, and said, "This is it." And then I kind of just, we went to the therapist that we'd been working with, and I kind of just spilled everything out on her, which probably wasn't fair, but yeah.
Yeah, we have an episode on disclosure now with Jeff Stewart, who's awesome. So, so all can learn to do it better than you and I did it. So, can definitely work. And I guess the question that I want to ask you, Troy, is talk to me about the desperation. So I remember my desperation moments of mine wasn't trying to edit bank statements. But I just remember my desperation moments. And I think to someone listening, who doesn't struggle with addiction, maybe doesn't get it. I think those of us who have, we're like, oh my gosh, I know that moment, right? I know. But describe what that desperation is about, because you're willing to go to crazy lengths to keep this secret. So for you, how would you describe that desperation? What was it about?
I don't know. It is just that feeling of you do not want to be seen. You do not want people to see the real you, because they're just going to realize that you're garbage. Right. I like you said, I was at the Warrior Heart Retreat, and I remember, I think it was Todd that was up there speaking, and he was talking about, he was telling a story, and he was talking about laying on the bathroom floor. And I remember doing that because that was the only way I felt any comfort. It was this is where I deserve to be, and it was just, on the one hand, I was trying and scraping and trying to do everything to hide my sins, hide everything, so that I wouldn't have to be revealed. But on the other hand, just feeling like garbage inside and feeling yeah.
Well, and that's I hope, and I just feel a little bit of pause, Troy, for just your heart, just the tender of kind of showing all of us a glimpse into how terrible that shame makes you feel. And so it's if the crazy's at a 10, the shame's at an 11. And if anyone listening doesn't know, now you know. And so if if you have any addicts in your life, or you as an addict are in denial about how bad it actually is of facing your darkness, the yuck in the middle of the field, it's that big. And I think people don't realize how big the pain is, and the suffering that is totally half self-inflicted. We get it, right? But just how big that is. And I feel you, brother.
Yeah. And so it was definitely something the next day was when, there wasn't really a lot of thinking about this. It was the next day, she tells me that she wants a divorce. And so that, again, it was just and I don't want to minimize what she was going through, because also obviously she was going through a lot. She'd been with me through school and all the stuff. And so, this was not where she wanted her life to be. And yet, she just, after she made the decision to divorce, it was just very quickly, she was all right, now we're doing this, now we're doing this. And I am just struggling to hang on, and I've always felt like someone that had pretty good mental health. I'm pretty stable. But it was during that time, definitely depressed, definitely, considered suicide, definitely considered all these things. And just it is not it is not worth it to be here anymore, you know?
Yeah. So as you mentioned earlier, the divorce happened.
Right.
Went through church discipline again. Right.
Excommunicated again.
Yep. And so I guess the question now, right? Like flipping the script, like, but you didn't take your own life. And despite getting divorced and going through church discipline again, you're here sharing your story on our podcast to help give other people hope who are struggling with this and struggling around it. So Troy, how did you get here? From that spot in 2019 to here?
Yeah. Yeah. And that was the thing, right? Because, you know, I had been kneeling praying, and I was told that everything was going to be all right. Nothing was all right for a long time. Like it was the worst. I had continued going to ARP meetings. You know, I'd hear these people talk about, you know, struggles.
And ARP is the LDS churches. Yeah, the LDS churches 12-step. So this is the 12-step within the church. So yes. Anyways, keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'd go there, you know, I'd hear these people talk about pornography and stuff like that. And I'm like, are you kidding me? That's what it felt like to me. Like, I was like, are you kidding? Like I'm here dying. Like, and so I joke around with them sometimes. I'm like, I feel like I am here to make the rest of you feel better. You know, like, I'm really suffering here. So I actually got hooked up with, well, that was the other thing. So I listened, my stake president had me listen to the Leading Saints podcast.
It's a good stake president.
Chris and Autumn were talking about their experience. And so I listened to it, and that gave me like this sliver of hope. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I take that to my wife at the time. I was like, you need to listen to this. Apparently he had already told her about it. And she said, I did listen to it. And she said, you're nothing like that guy. And I was like, oh gosh.
Not yet. I
was like, are you kidding me? Like I'm trying so hard. So I got in touch with Lifestar. And I was still overseas, and I was meeting with a counselor through Zoom and stuff like that. And one of the important things, it's interesting because I relearned this at the boot camp when I went, because they asked us, how does God speak to you? Which I think is a better way than saying like, how do you feel the Spirit? You know, like, no, how does God speak to you? And I learned that God speaks to me in stories. Because I've had lots of experiences with him speaking to me in stories. And so my counselor with Lifestyle, he would have me go through like these different guided meditations and stuff like that, which would help. But actually what helped more was that I would kind of make these stories up on my own. Like I would have these stories in my head, and then God would finish them for me. And they were incredibly healing. Like one experience that I had, like I just imagined my marriage was this house that was on fire, right? And I was the only one working to do anything to put it out. And I'm looking over, and my wife's just sitting there with her hands folded. Everyone else around us, like priesthood leaders, family, friends, everyone's just standing back. No one's doing anything. And I'm thinking, there is so much good here. We need to put out this fire so we can save this house. And then all of a sudden I hear this voice that just says, let it burn. And as tough as that was, it was incredibly healing in that moment to just, you know, because I thought if my house was really on fire and I knew my kids were safe and my spouse was safe, you know, that's what I would do. I would just let it burn, you know, and just sit there and watch it, you know? And so that was one experience. The other experience I'll share quickly, just because it has to do with that dark spot. I was just sitting there imagining that I was in this huge field, and I was approaching this swampy, yucky cave that was in the middle. And I had no idea what was in there, you know? And so I keep going forward until I'm pretty close. And then I see like these eyes coming out of the cave, and I'm like, all right, what kind of disaster is in here? And then what crawls out is, you know, me as a young child. Right. And that's changed that script for me ever since. Right. Like I no longer think about that dark spot in the middle, you know. I just think about that child that was hurting and what he needs, you know? So that was definitely another story that God completed for me, you know?
Dude, sometimes like there's nothing else to say, Troy. And I like, That's it, man. I mean, that's it. Wow, that's so beautiful.
So I'm sitting here filling in for James, and so I'm going to ask the question that James would ask. And Steve rolls his eyes at me.
I don't know why we always make it about James.
Doesn't need to be about James. This is about us. So before all of this went down, you had the message of I'm the least favorite son. And I can't help but wonder if that's how you saw God and your relationship with him.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think I shared a little bit before, but I just felt like, God didn't really care if I made it or not. It was kind of like, we're not really expecting that much from Troy. So, whatever.
Yeah. And now what I want to know, I'm just going there, Troy. What I want to know now is if I called God on the phone, that's how God and I talk. We're just hotspot, boo-doo-doo, speed dial. If I had God on the phone right now and I said, God, Troy believed for too many years that you were his least favorite son. Which son is he? What would God tell me?
God would say that I'm beloved. And this is actually another story, right? That God finished for me. And it was another time I was working with my therapist in the moment. And he said, I want you to imagine approaching the throne of God. And in my mind, I was like, I do not want to do that. That sounds like the worst thing I can imagine. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to do that, then I'll need help from the Savior, right? And so, gosh, I'm crying a lot today. I'm sorry.
Don't you ever apologize about being unashamed on my podcast ever again.
So in my mind, I just kind of called out to the Savior. Usually a lot of times you get this thought that Jesus was like this very solemn individual, the
whitewashed version. Yes. Yep.
That's how he's portrayed in a lot of pictures and movies and things like that. Just kind of a man of sorrow, right? Acquainted with grief. He comes into my vision and he is so happy, like so happy. I mean, so happy to see me, but then so excited to introduce me to the Father because he knew that it was going to take away any of those other feelings that I had about him. And it did. That was another, it was a script that just got blown up all of a sudden. I couldn't say that anymore. I couldn't say that I was the least favorite son anymore.
So, the last thing I want to ask you, Troy, here in our episode, and then whatever Jason's going to ask you too, but, you're divorced and, you aren't sitting here being like, and I've been remarried for 3 years and guess what, kids, it all works out. Right. And I know there's a lot of people in a lot of pain who they don't ever see the story at halftime. And, I was in a really dark, place in a lot of my own pain, at a point in my journey where my good friend Kurt Frankham, Leading Saints, everyone should listen to that podcast, said to me, he's like, yeah, Steve, these are the chapters that nobody ever reads. Of the book, he's like, someday, if you're some big deal or whatever, these are the chapters of your story that people won't read. Because I was just, and he just sat with me in just this darkness, I'm just like, oh my gosh. And so, you're here sharing your story, and the story's not finished, obviously. And you don't have it all buttoned up in a row. You're just getting rebaptized this Saturday. And you don't have this second marriage that you can say, see, and it all works out. So, what has that looked like for you navigating recovery and the co-parenting and then, deciding when and how to put yourself back out there? So just speak to us about, your shame and the pain of divorce and the healing you've had? Because I mean, you shared a really like God was with you, let that house burn, and so you had, it was clear that you were moving where you're supposed to be moving, but that doesn't mean it was easy, or that it is easy.
Yeah, and it was something early on after I was separated that I'd heard. At least for the LDS church, they were talking about how they said 80% of men who get divorced leave the church, which I can believe, because, if you're sitting there in your congregation and you have like the single mom walk in with her kids and your heart immediately goes out to them. If you have this guy walk into your congregation and he's a sex addict and whatever else, you don't feel as much compassion towards this person, right? Like it's hard to muster that same level of compassion, and it just adds this layer of shame, right? It's on top of it, even when I listen to your podcast, not like, and your podcast has been great, and it's not like I'd take anything away from it, but I would hear all these stories about, and my wife stayed with me and we're great, and it was just like, sure. There's the thought that, I'm the least favorite son, and God told my wife, get out of there, Yeah. So it was something like that. And then you had one guest, I think it was Thomas 2.0, and he was on, and he was talking about it, and he said, and this is when I finally was like, no, I need to email these guys and talk to them, because he said, I was considering divorce, but then, that was going to be the easy way out. And I was like, no, this is not the easy way out by any means. Right. Like this is something that is, I mean, it's different, right? Like there are different things. Like you have to deal with your wife's trauma all the time. I don't have to deal with that anymore as much, like not at the same level. So there are differences there. There are probably some things that are easier for me. But the pain, having my kids all be very aware of my weaknesses, things like that, and trying to rebuild the relationship with them, because their trust and their little hearts were broken too.
For sure.
And so trying to rebuild that, all these things that have been a lot, and it just adds on to that shame. And just going through the process of a divorce too is incredibly painful, on all levels.
Well, and I love how you spoke into that, because I think from where Thomas 2.0 was sitting at that time in his story, and with many men, that they're just like, oh, well, if I just got divorced, this would be easier. And as a counselor, what I would tell you is, whatever you are and whatever the pain is, you're taking it with you. So if you think it's all your partner's fault, get divorced and you're going to find out, right? You're going to, and so I think, too often we have a script, right? We talked about moving that field, your facade through recovery. And I think a lot of times in that recovery, we bring it into the relationship. And, I have, other stories and have witnessed people, we've had several people on the podcast who got remarried. We just had Rob Smith's story earlier this year, and no, they got divorced. And that was post, they both had healed a lot. And she's like, this just isn't my life and my story. And he's like, I get it. And that was it. And so I think if, it's almost the same thing as people are like, if I get married, then I won't have an addiction anymore. And we all on this side of it are like, oh, ha ha. We all remember when we were young and thought that was true, how dumb we were. I think it's the same thing that if you think there's a right answer of stay married or don't stay married, recovery, real work is hard. Real emotional healing and looking at my pain, looking at the swamp in the middle of it is difficult. Single, married, whatever, it's going to be difficult, right? Through the divorce, it's going to be difficult. And so I think I just appreciate you kind of sharing your heart and your perspective on that, because I think people always think the grass is greener on the other side, or, they don't get this or they don't get that. And it's look, it's hard. Recovery's hard. I know people who feel very lonely in their marriage, and they're like, man, I wish if I was divorced, at least I could say, well, yeah, I'm lonely because I'm alone. This makes sense. Where they're in their marriage and they're like, this is so twisted, and I know great people who are single who can't find the right person and the compatibility, and it's not because they're not willing or looking for perfection. And so you're just bringing a humanness to this whole thing, Troy, that I just love.
Well, and it is something like, one of the things that I just felt like it was a message that just got repeated over and over to me, was that, my wife and my kids, that was now the new family, and I was something separate. Right. And so like, I'm here over by myself, and this is the new family. And that seemed to be repeated by like church leaders, by the therapists, like everyone, like this message kept coming into me. And like, honestly, outside the healing and everything, it took a little bit of grit to just say, no, I'm not doing this anymore. And I think that's the other thing I'd say about divorce is I think so many times, men, especially when they're going through something like this, they will, give away the farm when they're going through a divorce, and then end up being just really bitter afterwards. And I think in a lot of times you need to stand up for yourself, and you need to say, hey, no, I'm worth something, and fight for what you need, because it is unfortunately a fight. And I tried really hard to be fair and equitable, during the divorce, but it is a fight too. And you got to stand up for yourself. Like, try any means to make it as amiable as possible, but sometimes that's not possible. And so you need to make sure that you take care of yourself and your kids.
Well, and I would just say, to fight for your kids' hearts, because I know many stories of men who are like, whatever, I'm the one who did all the bad things, take it, and they get 2 years down the road and they're like, why do I only have my kids 30% of the time? Wait a minute, I want to make her parent love my kids, not be cut out of their lives. And those are good men who want a father. And even if you're divorced, always going to be their dad, always going to be their mom, right? So you're right. Like, I still have to navigate this. And, I have a, sister who has had that be her experience. And it's like, and she has, she's like, no matter what I do, it's their dad. So no matter what it is between us, I still have to show up. And that can be tough to navigate, but gotta show up for you.
So Troy, just to wrap up here, the last question I have for you is, for those men in the audience who are listening who are the least favorite sons,
or women who feel like they're the least favorite daughter,
but for those that feel like they're just not who God wants them to be,
they're on the bathroom floor,
what do you say to them about who God is and maybe about who they are to Him?
It's such, I don't know, it's such a flip to the script, right? Like it's so, and I wish I would know how to get there immediately. Like, I wish I could just tell somebody, hey, this is how you know that God loves you. But it's hard because, yes, you can get messages of shame and stuff through church and life and whatever else. But at the same time, like, there are lots of messages talking about how God loves you. For some reason, I wasn't hearing those. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people that are feeling the same way. They're not hearing those messages. But
I know that God loves me. I just know that He loves Steve more. He doesn't love me like He loves His other children. Like, yeah, He loves me, but it's just not.
Yeah. And that's how I felt. Like, it was like, yeah, on some level He loves me, just because I'm the least favorite doesn't mean He doesn't still love me. He cares about me, but I'm just not that interesting to Him. I'm just one of the crowd, and so He's got lots better children that He wants to take care of more than me. But I don't know, the feeling that I had in that story that I talked about was just this overwhelming, like, no, like, it's you. It's you that I love.
Yeah.
Like, I am crazy about you. Yeah, I just love you because you are mine.
And Troy, as you know, we always let people end with a song. So the song for you.
I do. So this is one of my favorite. And I know a lot of times you guys have like the different Christian songs on here, but this is a hymn, Nearer My God to Thee. And there's a good version by BYU Vocal Point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Troy, thank you. I have goosebumps right now because we all need to remember that He's crazy about us and that we're that one, whether we've gotten sober or not. So I'm just grateful that my heart got to receive that message from you. And I hope that those listening will let that message in. Like you said, Troy is a real guy. Lives in Texas. Served in the military. Thank you for your service, by the way. I forgot to say that. And if you want more people to hear this message of hope, we invite you to go to iTunes. Even if you're not listening on iTunes, go to iTunes and give us 5 stars. That's how the world finds us and hears more. We'd love for you to connect with us on social media at Unashamed Unafraid at Facebook and Instagram. If you are in need of resources and help, you can go to our resource page, but also apply for a scholarship. Please do. We have them. You are worthy of it. unashamedunafraid.com/scholarships. And if you would like to help support those scholarships, we are a nonprofit 501c3. So all of your money, literally all, no one on our staff gets paid. So all of your money will go to help support and create those scholarships. And that will also allow you to become an outsider. Our outsiders are those who are bold, accepted, and unashamed, like our friend Troy here. And that will allow you to jump into the bonus content with us right now and to be able to hear some more questions that we're going to ask Troy that we weren't able to fit into the episode. And if this is the first time joining, thank you for listening. We're happy that you're here. We hope that you listen to some more stories and have hope. And if you need anything from the Unashamed team, reach out. All of our emails are on the website, unashamedunafraid.com. We'd all love to hear from you, pray for you, get your back, whatever you need from us. So until we're able to talk again, continue to be unashamed. And with that, we will go out with Nearer My God to Thee by BYU Vocal Point.
All my song shall be nearer, my God, to Thee, nearer, my God, to Thee, nearer to Thee. Though like the wanderer, the sun gone down, darkness beyond me, my rest Excelsior, angels to beckon me, nearer, my God, to Thee, nearer, my God, to Thee, nearer to Genus Domine ad Augusta per Angusta, sic itura Excelsior.